Guten Tag guys, in today's video we'll talk about pull-up advice and why a lot of it is not that good. And I'm especially talking about pull-up advice for getting your first pull-up. Now, if you currently can't do a pull-up and you've been searching for advice on YouTube, then you most likely have heard stuff like do a lot of dead hangs, scapular pull-ups and negative pull-ups. Maybe you've also heard about assisted pull-ups and inverted rows. And these can all be very useful, but depending on how you use them, they can also be a huge waste of time. Just yesterday I was talking to a guy in the gym who's been trying to get a pull-up for the last 3 months, and he's been doing a lot of hangs and negative pull-ups, and he is still not closer to getting his first pull-up than 3 months ago. What's the problem if you can't do a pull-up? Well, your pulling strength is not enough for your body weight. So you're either too weak or too heavy or both. And because within the same person, size and strength do correlate, you could also say that your pulling muscles are too small. Let's put the pull-up aside for just a minute and think about how you would try to get to a 100 kilo squat or bench press. If you know even a little bit about strength training, you would say that you just pick a weight that you can handle and over time try to increase the weight as you get stronger, and maybe also throw in a few accessories. And you would be totally right. No one would recommend a 100 kilo squat negative to learn the squat, or a bench press lockout hold for 45 seconds until you do a bench press. But for pull-ups and other calisthenics exercises, that happens a lot. Before I go further into why a lot of what you hear is not that great, I'll just give you some good advice. If you can't do a pull-up and you're somewhat normal body weight, then your back muscles are just too weak and therefore too small. So if you want to be able to do a pull-up, then just focusing on getting a bigger and stronger back. Of course, there's tons of ways to strengthen your back, but the easiest is to just pick 2 movements that involve elbow flexion and shoulder extension and focus on these. I don't care if it's vertical or if it's horizontal. I don't care if you use a machine, dumbbell or whatever. Just pick 2 movements that you like, do it between 6 and 12 reps for 3 to 4 sets and do that twice a week. At least one of the movements should target mainly the lats. If you want, you can also throw in some accessories for your forearms and your biceps. But doing 2 good back exercises will be enough to grow your back. And then, once you have a stronger back, you can think about doing stuff that is more specific to the pull-up. But most likely, you won't have to because you will already be able to do a pull-up. The pull-up is not a very technical movement, and it's also not one where you need a lot of mobility or stability. If you can't do it, you're too weak. So if you get stronger, you will be able to do it, even if you don't practice it that much. Now back to ranting about some shitty advice. This advice comes from a video from a channel that has over 7 million subscribers, and it's really shitty. In this video, the first step to be able to do a pull-up is to master the dead hang, and to do that for at least 45 seconds before you move on to the next step, which is doing at least 10 scapular pull-ups. So this dude is telling you that until you can hold yourself for 45 seconds, which depending on your body weight might take a while, until you can do that, you don't move on to the next exercise and you don't do anything else. What? First up, you don't need to be able to hold yourself for 45 seconds. A pull-up takes 1 or 2 seconds. It's good to be able to hold yourself for 45 seconds if you're doing many reps, but for your first pull-up, 45 seconds, definitely not. Secondly, and much more importantly, why would you not do anything else until you can do that? There are a lot of muscles active in the pull-up, but the main mover is probably the lats. And in the dead hang, the lats are not that active, and in the scapular pull-up, they're also not that active. So in step 1 and 2, you're not training the lats at all. So depending on your body weight and blah blah blah, the first step, trying to master a 45-second hold, might take you, I don't know, about 6 weeks. And the second step, getting 10 scapular pull-ups, might take 2 weeks more, something like that. So you basically spend 2 months training for the pull-up without training the lats, the main movers of the pull-up, once. What? That makes absolutely no sense. Do your hangs, do your scapular pull-ups, but please also train your lats from the start. Another exercise that almost all the videos recommend is the negative pull-up. And I just have one question. Why? It's not that the negative pull-up is a bad exercise, but it's definitely not that good to be recommended by everybody. It's true that the negative part, the eccentric part, is easier than the concentric part. But if you're still far away from a pull-up, then even the negative will be way too hard for you. Secondly, negatives are not that practical. You either have to jump up to the bar, which is not a great way to learn the pull-up for beginners, because it's very hard to get the right technique this way, or you need something that you can step onto after every rep, which is better, but still takes a lot of time between reps. Just because the negative pull-up is a pull-up doesn't make it a great way to achieve a normal pull-up. If I would have to learn the pull-up again, I would take a one-armed cable or dumbbell row over a negative pull-up. Sure, it's not that close to the pull-up, but it has a concentric, it has an eccentric, and you can start at a weight that you can handle, and you can easily increase the weight in small steps. But what if you're a pure calisthenics person and dumbbells and cables are not an option for you? What then? First up, ask yourself why you're limiting yourself to only body weight. I love calisthenics, but I don't think being a purist and only performing calisthenics exercises is a good thing, especially as a beginner. Now, if you work out at home or at a park, then that's a different story, of course. But if you work out at a gym, then incorporating some weights and some machines will help you a ton. If you have no access to weights, then an inverted row is a great way to train your back. I was very delighted that in quite a few of the videos they actually mentioned inverted rows, or sometimes they call them Australian pull-ups, but it's still the same thing. Depending on how you do the inverted row, you can change the difficulty, which is a great thing. Still, if you have access to weights, it might be easier to progress this way. Because even though you can change the difficulty, on the inverted row, the progressions are not that straightforward. When it comes to assisted pull-ups, which are also often mentioned, well, they're great. I have nothing negative to say about them. Sure, if you use the machine, then you don't really train your core, and if you use the band, the resistance curve will be different than for the normal pull-up. But all in all, these two are still far better than negative pull-ups and scapular pull-ups. So if you have the ability to do them, then go for them. Now, one last thing before we close the video. At what point can your pull-up training just consist of pull-ups? So how many pull-ups should you be able to do before you can focus all your pull-up training on only doing pull-ups? I'd say that 5 to 6 reps as your maximum is a good minimum before you start going into only doing pull-ups. Because usually you do a few sets of the exercise and doing just 1 or 2 reps per set is not that great. And if you can do 6 pull-ups, for example, then you could do 5 in the first set, 4 and 4 in the second and third set, and 3 reps in the last set. Granted, these are still quite low rep sets, but at some points, if you want to be able to do pull-ups, you just want to do pull-ups. Sure, a 3 rep set might not be optimal, but at some point you just want to focus on the thing that you want to do. Of course, you can also throw in a few pull-ups, even if you can just do 1 or 2. But at this stage, I would still focus a lot on the rest of your back training. That's all for today's video. Let me know if you enjoyed it. Maybe I can also do a video on the later stages of pull-ups. So I don't know, getting from 5 pull-ups to 10 pull-ups or something like that. If you would be interested in that. If you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, write me some comments, it helps the algorithm. You're also very welcome to leave me some criticism down in the comments. This was Fred, thanks for watching. I was very delighted that in quite a few of the videos they actually mentioned inverted rows, or sometimes they call them Australian pull-ups, but it's still the same thing. So good on all the creators for having a little bit of brains.